To understand the origins of humanity, you must also understand the origins of Earth, its development, and how it's impacted our evolution. If you do the research, you will begin to see the origins of humanity, the development of race, and just how irrelevant it is to our being on this planet and our evolution today. If you look deep enough into the past, you will also find that we have been able to live together peacefully and in harmony. To understand
what's something that you're aware of, but the majority of people just aren't ready to hear.
That there were 7 root races of beings destined to occupy Earth, and that we present-day humans are the 5th such race. After us, there's 2 more yet to come. The 6th race will evolve out of us and apparently go back to occupy Lemuria. And finally, the 7th root race will leave Earth altogether and start over on a new planet. Each of these 7 root races are said to be composed of 7 sub-races. These 7 sub-races are said to be descendants of the sub-race of the 4th race. They called them the Atlanteans.
So, here we are, exploring your heritage. We are what you call the Tyrannium, angelic human race. Tyrannium is what you would say are future humans. And this is who we're made of. All of these different races, 12 races, root races, you can also call Earthseed races. The Polarians, Hyperboreans, Lemurians, Atlanteans, Aryan, Movarian, and Chechi. We're also part of what you call starseed races. And there's 5 starseed races in our DNA template. And that is Antrian, starseed, Brainua, starseed, Hibaru, starseed, that's our one for this race, and Melchizedek, starseed, for the future race, and Uniseti for an even farther future race. This is our heritage at a higher level. When we talk about the future humans, this is what we will become. The Tyrannium with 12 strands and 12 tribes, 12 races of beings inside our DNA. That's what you call a hybrid. We are a hybrid race. And why we're called angelic race is for, while we have different types of beings in our universe, in our reality, some of them are made with bird strains. Bird, like we have reptiles, we got dolphins, we have different types of beings, and some of them are made from birds. Like that would be part of their DNA. If you have part bird, you could, some of these beings that really do have wings. Hominids, humanoids, that looking races that have wings. And there's a few types of races, but this video is mostly about our race, the Tyrannium. And this is our origins. This is what is part of who we are. So just remember, there's 12 races. And this is our, you would say, a diagram of the true structures of our real reality, which is called a 15-dimensional time matrix hologram. This is a hologram reality, and it's made with 5 density universes, which we initiate DUs for. Now, here we go. We come from the system at the top, and you start, the last dimension is dimension 15. And when you leave dimension 15, you are outside of this reality matrix, this hologram. You're an ascended master. And notice also that there's 3 levels of that. Now we come into the time matrix, and this is the first density, density 5. Every 3 dimensions, as you see, is a different density. So the first 3 are density 5, and it's an antimatter universe. So after that, we go into density 4, made of dimensions 10, 11, and 12. Density 3, 7, 8, and 9. Density 2, which is where we originally come from, dimensions 4, 5, and 6. But we're actually, because of problems in our history, we're down here in the lowest level, the lowest density, the carbon matter universe of dimensions 1, 2, and 3.
So Blavatsky theorized that there would be 7 sub-races that would be divided into 7 epochs, each giving birth to 7 sub-races. At this point in time, only 5 root races have appeared so far. They say the 6th root race will appear sometime in the 28th century. As I said before, in between each of the root races or epochs, some major cataclysmic event takes place, virtually wiping out all of Earth's inhabitants. Now, during this time, supposedly a Manu will reincarnate, and they choose a handful of people to seed the next root race. The first root race was the Polarian, and it was mainly ethereal. They reproduced by dividing like an amoeba. The second root race is known as the Hyperborean race, and Hyperborea included what is now northern Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, and northern Asia. and they reproduced by budding. The third root race was the Lemurian race, and its last remnants are the Australian continent, the island of New Guinea, and the island of Madagascar. They coexisted with dinosaurs, and they were much taller and bigger than our current race, and they reproduced by laying eggs. The fourth race was the Atlantean root race, and the current fifth root race is the Aryan root race, which they say emerged from the previous fourth root race beginning about 100,000 years ago. And according to Blavatsky, the Aryan race consisted of individuals varying from dark brown, almost black, red, brown, yellow, down to the whitest creamy color. And alleged
find the archaeological trail as to what races existed. It's even harder to find it when you have a bunch of Leviathan races and fallen angelic races, or ETs, whatever you want to call them, coming in and manipulating the paper trail behind them. They didn't want things found. They got rid of most of, and there wasn't too many of them to begin with, the bodies of the cloister races. They had elongated heads and they were very tall. There's been a few they missed, and they were found, I think they were found in Peru or something, weren't they? Or South America somewhere, I think. But they have to say that these were beings that suffered from encephalitis, I think they said, swelling of the brain that made their heads grow bigger. Yeah, swelling of the brain, all right. That's what happens when you have larger brains. There has been a progressive sweep, and right now we're still in the middle of this. Science is hugely controlled on this planet. What the common people are allowed, even in America, where the land of the free and the home of the brave. Yeah.
If you're familiar with the theory of the 7 root races.
The 7 root races, but where did this information come from? So I became a member of the Theosophical Society a few months ago, and there's this one teacher, his name is Pablo Sender. He is part of the Theosophical Society of America, so he studies and he teaches Theosophy, and he has taught me so much information, but he has this article that I found online, and I took a bunch of screenshots, so I'm going to share that with you now, and you can read for yourself. Take a screenshot, and another. It's quite a few.
So we're finally having some constructive conversations about race, and as a biologist, I want to throw in my 2 cents. You see, humans first evolved about 200,000 years ago in East Africa. We are all Africans, and the very first humans were black. This is because darker skin contains more melanin, which blocks out UV light and protects folic acid so you can have healthier babies. Then my ancestors moved way up north where there isn't a lot of direct sunlight, and if you don't have enough UV light, you get horrible bone deformities, so we had to get lighter skin so we could have strong bones. Every defining racial feature that you can think of has an evolutionary history like this, and there's actually more genetic diversity within races than there are between them. This is important because as a kid, I was always taught that race is a very real thing, but it doesn't matter and you shouldn't talk about it. But the reality is that the opposite is true. Race is totally made up, but it's very important to people and we should absolutely be talking about it.
Hey y'all boy, look yeah, I about to break down the origin of the 3 human races. The first physical super or root race is the Lemurian Atlantean Negro. They existed before the Great Catastrophe on the supercontinent known as Gondar. Gondar was modern-day South and Central America, Africa, Australia, and India. Map on the screen in case I forget any of them. All of these are cradles of civilizations. The Lemurian and Atlantean Negro subraces were the Negritos and Negrios, which can later be identified as Capoids, Australoids, Melanesians, Americoids or Amerindians, Nilotics, Dravidians, and Congoids. All of these Negro subraces had dominant features: dark hair and dark skin, dark eyes, and kinky or curly hair. They originally had an AY chromosomal haplogroup, which is the unmutated ancestral DNA that all other DNA originates from. Interbreeding with early hominids caused a mutation on our Y chromosome and caused the Atlantean and Lemurian Negroid to be represented by haplogroups A through F. These people are responsible for building many of the first world structures such as the Sphinx, the heads at Easter Island, and the Olmec heads, and many more that are buried and yet to be discovered because they're covered by the mud flood. After the destruction of the supercontinent and the beginning of the Ice Age, we see the birth of the second root race, the Eurasian Mongoloid. This race was born from the Atlantean Negroid mixing with the Neanderthals and Denisovans for survival. Keep in mind that the Neanderthal and the Denisovan were just early humans from the Laurasian supercontinent that had genetically recessive traits which allowed them to be bred out through assimilation. This early assimilation is why the Eurasian has more Neanderthal DNA than any other race. Their haplogroups start with F and go all the way through Q. These are your modern day steppe people, Chinese and Siberians that lived on the Eurasian supercontinent in North America. Keep in mind that the Siberians in America didn't walk here through the Bering Strait landmass. They were born here like every other race. The Siberians in America are represented by the Eskimos, the Inuit Indians. They have a Q haplogroup which originated about 25 to 12,000 years ago, which coincides with the end of the Ice Age. The third and final root race is the Aryan root race, which originated 25 to 10,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, and are represented by haplogroups H through R, which H and R seem to be the most common haplogroups in Europe. This is the era we live in now, so the Aryan haplogroups are spread to all four corners of the earth, just like every other race that preceded them. Everyone on the planet belongs to one of these root races, whether you're Hispanic, Arab, North African, etc. Your Y chromosome directly ties you to one of these root races. The fourth root race will be born from the eugenics program, and that's the biggest threat to humanity as we know it to this day. That's the gorilla in the room. Plus,
the Polarian root race, according to theosophical teachings, represents one of the 7 stages in the evolution of humanity. The Polarians are considered the first of these stages and is believed to have existed during a very early period of Earth's history. It is described as ethereal and non-physical, more like spiritual beings than physical humans. The Polarians are thought to have lived in a polar region, hence the name, and were asexual reproducing beings. As they evolved, they eventually divided into 2 sexes, which marked the transition to the next root race, the Hyperboreans.
Part 5, thank you everybody for the follow, thank you for listening. But as of now, I will not answer to any rude questions or any rude comments because it's over with. This is called the Norb theory. So when I talk about these lands, they're actually a race of people. And this is where the epochs come in. So there are 4 humanoid root races. It went from the Hyperboreans to the Lemurians to the Atlanteans, which is us, and then it goes to the Aryans. The Polarians, which you see right here, is the master root race. They call this the heavens. They don't have a certain size, race, skin pigment, color, nothing, anything like that. But they are looked upon as like a blue indigo, clear shape, something. But these lands come every 24,000 years. So first it was the Hyperboreans, 24,000 years later it's the Lemurians, then the Atlanteans, then the Aryans. These lands can be 3,000 years above or 3,000 years behind, according to time. We are the city.
And what we're experiencing is the ending of the 6th root race and all of its sub-root races, which leads to the 7th root race, the Pangaian. And when the Pangaian is birthed, we are a whole. We are the angelic human in form. And we move out of this 3rd dimensional plane and we move into the 5th dimensional plane, which is in the ether within the firmament. This is a semi-etheric field of expression, and the minerals that exist in here are like high vibrational frequency material, like liquid and gold and crystal silica. Things of this nature are present in the 5th dimensional realms. So it is a semi-etheric expression experience where your physical vessel in this now moment is going through a genetic mutation, which happens through environmental influence of ultraviolet rays that come from the sun. That creates a variant gene and creates a genetic mutation in the DNA, which creates a new DNA strand, all right, which is lighter and less dense because of the ultraviolet radiation, which is known and notorious for killing bacteria. And essentially that's what we are. We are a fission and fusion of light and bacteria. The bacteria is the part of us that makes us mineral, that makes us part of a living organism within this hologram, within this holographic spiritual experience that we call Earth. Okay, so as that mutation of that bacterial cell continues its mutation process, it lightens and it takes out the density, which is what we see as shadow work, is dealing with the belief systems and the constructs and the limitations that have been imprinted on us energetically and in our social cultural conditioning, or what we can say programming of this reality. And so as we go through this genetic mutation, what's happening and during this now period of ascension and expansion, what we're seeing is the activation of the third eye. It's also referred to as a fire trine within. This is the pineal, pituitary, and the hypothalamus. They have a crystal inside that sparks and opens, and this connects you into your ether bodies and that higher vibrational frequency that comes in through the atmosphere and the higher planes. And so that is what we will be frequency and harmony with, and we'll be able to utilize our vessel and move between space-time or into this higher plane, dimensional reality.
The school of Theosophy teaches that a series of 7 root races or humanities will develop during the present round of the Earth's spiritual evolution. We are currently in the 5th. Each lives on its own continent, a word referring not only to the main continental area where the evolution of a root race takes place, but also to all the dry land that exists during the life period of a root race. Just as the root races overlap, so parts of the continents of one root race become incorporated into the continental system of the next. Creation unfolds as a series of epochs. For each epoch, there is a day and a night. During your life, you experience day and night. Similarly, from a higher point of view, your entire life is one day. Death is the entrance into night. After night passes, a new day arrives, a new existence, and the same is true of these worlds. Related to this humanity, there have been many days and nights. We are now in the middle of a great cosmic day. In Sanskrit, what's called a Mahamanvantara. We are in the 4th day, or epoch, and there are 7 cycles or rounds within each day. In the Akashic records, there have only been 4 epochs. This current epoch has had to do with moving away from etheric existence to physical existence. Helena Blavatsky writes, "We believe in the 7 continents, 4 of which have already lived their day. The 5th still exists, and 2 are to appear in the future." The first continent was the imperishable sacred land. Although little can be said of it, it capped over the whole North Pole like one unbroken crust. This was the home of the first race of mankind, the polar race, which had neither type nor color. These, our first ancestors, had ethereal, not physical bodies, and could not be injured or destroyed by death. We can absolutely draw a parallel to Plato's account of an original race that was deathless and non-breeding. In the Kabbalah of the Mayan Mysteries, Samael on Weor writes, "The Aztecs state that the human beings of the first root race were extraordinary, dark-colored giants. This was a very civilized, androgynous, asexual, semi-physical, semi-ethereal root race. The first root race lived on the sacred island situated in the North Polar Cap. That island still exists, yet it is in a Jinn state within the 4th dimension. The second continent is very elusive. It's considered home of the second root race, the Greek Hyperborean race. Theosophical accounts say it extended southward and westward from the North Pole, but most others have identified the North Pole as Hyperborea's location, including René Guénon, Miguel Serrano, William Warren, and many others, not to mention the name itself, Hyperborea, refers to something beyond the aurora borealis, which shoots out of the center of our plane. So despite what Theosophy says, everything points to Hyperborea as being a polar continent. It's strange because in this way, it's very much related to the imperishable sacred land. And one must ask, is the second continent simply the first continent in a later time period? It's more than likely. After all, continents, as Blavatsky writes, has to do with all of the land in general inhabited during a root race's cycle. Let's go over to what Miguel Serrano has said in Na's Book of the Resurrection. He writes, "Hyperborea still exists, beyond the yellow sun and the black sun, in the ray of green light," suggesting that Hyperborea, once a continent existing at the North Pole, now has an etheric double within the realms of the green light, the aurora borealis. But this is pretty much what Samael on Weor wrote of the first continent. We'll resolve this later. The third continent is said to have stretched from the Indian Ocean to Australia, and this is known as Lemuria or Mu. This was when the gods walked the earth and mixed freely with mortals. All of these stories of Nephilim, Anunnaki, these originate in Lemuria, and this is also when the fall of man began. It was a slow process that kept up during the fourth continent. The survivors of the destruction of Lemuria gave birth to Atlantis. Hierarchies in society began, and worship of material goods started. The Atlanteans had degenerated a great deal and had now started using their awesome powers for evil. Their magical science became black, and with these changes came horrible devices. The Atlanteans could now create a mental monster that could crystallize into existence through their willpower. Millions of people perished, and all of the powerful cities of Atlantis submerged within the ocean that now bears its name. The fifth continent is said to be Asia, where theosophical writings tell us the fifth root race began. Of course, we're still in this race time period, so all dry land is the fifth continent. It's said that this Aryan root race, instead of evolving, has devolved, and its corruption is now worse than that of the Atlanteans in their epoch. And there are two more continents and races that have yet to exist within this great cosmic day.
Origin of modern
Y'all ever heard of
Asians.
the Tartarians? Well, the Tartarians are the Eurasian Mongoloid root race that inhabited the second world supercontinent known as Laurasia, aka Tartary. They were born in the Arctic or Tarctic regions and the Antarctic regions, and they are the descendants of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. With the destruction of Atlantis, aka the Ice Age, the Lemurian Negroid interbred with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans for survival, as the Neanderthals were built to survive these harsh regions, and they had already made their homes in subterranean tunnels and underground caves. Within these underground caves, the Lemurian Negroid interbred with the Neanderthal in a process called hybridization. When they emerged from the caves, they were the anatomically modern Eurasian Mongoloid. They were born all over Tartaria, which is northern Europe, northern Western and Central Asia, and northern America up into the Arctic regions. They were very barbaric in nature due to their harsh environment, and this new hybrid race immediately became a threat and a rival to their Lemurian Negroid forebearers. As they came from the north, the Tartarians invaded and seized previous Lemurian cities and structures. As they met stronger Lemurian forces such as the ancient Egyptians, they were sometimes subdued and civilized, and that's how they learned architecture and language. Fortifications such as the Sumerian Wall were built to keep these Tartarians from invading any further. Scientifically, the Tartarians can be represented by Y DNA haplogroups F through Q, which F being the outer Africa gene which ties the Mongoloid to the Negroid, and Q being the haplogroup representing the Siberian Mongoloids. Ethnically, the Tartarians can be represented by the Nephilim, the Hittites and the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Mongoloids, and the Siberian North American. Biblically, the Tartarians can be represented by the Semite, as the word Semite means half or part human, aka the Nephilim. They were civilized by people like Nimrod, who was the mighty hunter before the Lord, able to tame the Neanderthal. Nimrod was the Lemurian who mixed with the Neanderthal in the Sumer region and used the Tartarians to build his empire. Nimrod was the grandfather of Peleg, which would make him also the great-great-great-grandfather of Abraham the Semite. Nimrod was the son of Cush, which we should all know by now as the esoteric name of Atlantis, or Lemuria. That's the gorilla in the room. Plus Ultra.